In 1741, Jonathan Edwards preached a hellfire and brimstone sermon to his congregation, and it was such a success that he delivered that same sermon many times again, and it went as viral as it could have in the 18th century. In fact, it was part of the inspiration for the First Great Awakening. When people heard the sermon, they were shaken by his words. They trembled in the pews. They'd get on their knees and pray for forgiveness right then and there. The Holy Spirit was convicting the conscience of every sinner in that building. At least, that's how the stories go. Preaching hellfire and brimstone has been an American tradition since its founding. It's been a method of control for certain types of churches. It uses shock and awe to remind us of the entropy that surrounds us, of our sinful nature, and the obligation to get right with God, lest His judgment comes down upon us, either in this life or the next. I remember watching a sermon on YouTube from Paul Washer in 2006 where he pleaded in front of a sanctuary full of teenagers to get right with God or face the consequences. For many conservatives and Christians, the plan to restore the country seems to be to stand up and say the truth, speak what's right, and we all clap and say amen, and then we go home the victors. But of course, it's opposite day. And so none of that works. On a regular day, you could preach fire and brimstone, and people would feel convicted. They would feel remorse, and they would feel a longing to fix their spiritual wickedness in the eyes of God. But it's opposite day, and so that doesn't happen. People are out of it. They're largely unfamiliar with the Bible and its morals or its famous passages or parables, and they don't care. They've probably had an abortion or two themselves and are on their way to get another one. We are so far beyond shocking people out of the state of the world because they're all in it. You're going to throw a bunch of Old Testament verses at this lady, and she's going to hear them and change her mind about her whole worldview? I don't think so. Even Jesus addresses these kinds of people. The disciples came to him and asked, "Why do you speak to the people in parables?" He replied, "Because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. This is why I speak to them in parables. Though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not hear or understand. In them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah. You will ever be hearing, but never understanding. You will ever be seeing, but never perceiving. For this, people's hearts have become calloused. They hardly hear with their ears, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn. And I would heal them." I'll never forget a story I heard by a pastor named Bob Streblow tell one time about 7 visions that he had that lasted 3.5 hours. One of the visions he called Mr. Pegalo at the Gates of Hell. Mr. Pegalo was the town drunk, and all of these visions culminated in God telling him that Mr. Pegalo needed to be saved. He actually turned this vision into a book that's basically just a transcription of the sermon I heard, but I want to read a portion of it. Now, I know this is random, but I have a point here, and try to stick with me. For context, the vision starts with God taking him along a road that led to a T. One path went spiraling off into darkness, and the other path led upwards to heaven. God takes him up to heaven, and then decides to show him where the road spiraling down led. And this is where I'm going to pick up the story at. When we came to the T, he took me to the left, that broad road. This time, as I looked to where the broad road led down into darkness, I was amazed to see things I hadn't noticed the first time. The road was filled with a river of human beings streaming down the highway. As I looked at this mass of humanity, I saw great anxiety written on their faces, frustration, confusion, perplexity. I could hear them rustling and pushing and shoving, always reaching, searching, hoping for something. It all seemed so urgent. Sensing an urgency even within myself, I said to the one who was with me, that's how he refers to God in this whole thing, "Why are all these people going in that direction? Haven't they ever been to the city from which we have just come? Shouting to the crowd, I cried, "Hey there, you don't want to go that way. This is the way to go." The drone from the mass of humanity seemed to drown out my voice. I lifted my voice to the top of my lungs. "Don't go that way! Go this way!" But the louder my voice became, the more intense their drone seemed to become. Becoming frantic, I said, "I've got to do something about these people." And I reached my hand into the stream of humanity. It was like a whirlpool drawing me into its movement. Have you ever been on a road when a freight train or a huge semi-truck went by? You almost get sucked right under the wheels. When I got close to the stream of humanity, it would have been the easiest thing in the world to just fall in step with it. It took great effort to keep my equilibrium. I braced myself. I didn't want to go with them. As I reached into the stream again, I grabbed a man by the arm. He turned and looked at me cynically, his eyes like cold steel. He shook my hand off his arm as though I were a snake biting him. Instinctively, I said, "Sir, you don't want to go that way. Come, go the way I've gone." He turned around and with those steel eyes snapping said, "Mind your own business, kid. I'm going to go my own way." Immediately, I reached for other persons. There were many different reactions from these people. I grabbed some with such insistence, I'm sure it hurt them. Most of them didn't say a word, but their eyes almost withered my hand as I touched them. Every one of them shook my hand loose as their unflinching eyes indicated, "Leave me alone." I believe this is how most people are now. They're uninterested and out of it, determined to stay on their course no matter how poorly thought out or how badly reasoned it may be, which leads to the question of, what is even the point in trying to argue or debate or use shock and awe tactics to persuade them to change their mind? So you're probably wondering what I'm even on about and why I'm talking about this stuff and what it has to do with the title. Well, all over my town the other week, flyers were distributed out by a group calling themselves the Abolitionist Rising Movement. They were also out in force at my local state college campus as well, with graphic signs of abortions on them, trying to raise awareness about their cause, which is to abolish abortion nationwide with no exceptions. Now, I got off work, and there was a flyer on my windshield. So let's see what the flyer says. Let's go through it together. First page, public service announcement. God hates our hands. Abolitionistrising.com. We hold these truths: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. From the founding of our nation, the American people have celebrated these principles as self-evident truths upon which our nation was established. The Declaration of Independence explained that the U.S. government was instituted to secure these God-given rights, and that any government that becomes destructive of these rights must in turn be altered, abandoned, or abolished. But while these rights have always been declared and celebrated in word, they have rarely, if ever, been upheld in deed. When it comes to inalienable human rights, we are a nation of hypocrites. From the beginning, and for nearly 100 years, the American people hypocritically celebrated the inalienable right to liberty while denying that same right to black people. In America today, we no longer deny liberty to all, but instead have become so obsessed with liberty to the point that we use our own liberty to brutally murder others. Though our culture boasts about our belief in human rights, we no longer recognize the right to life for every human. Instead, we murder those who are vulnerable and inconvenient in the pursuit of our own liberty and autonomy. Open this fold to see what we have done with our liberty. This is what we have done with our liberty. God hates the hands that shed innocent blood. Proverbs 6:16-17. God sets his face against cultures that allow child sacrifice. Leviticus 20:1-5. Shedding innocent blood defiles a people, pollutes their land, and brings on the judgment of God. Numbers, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Psalm. True liberty is a blessing, but we have abused our liberty. and we have rebelled against God. But it doesn't have to be this way. 700 years before Christ, the prophet Isaiah, blah, 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 blah. Let's just cut right to the unpopular opinion. Hellfire and brimstone messaging has been a massive failure. The style of churches that preach this kind of stuff are dying in America. Membership in all churches nationwide is falling fast, including the hippy-dippy love kind. And these kind of churches are barely hanging on. And really, the only new members they get are the babies that are born into it. Well, how are they going to save the country and build a grassroots movement when they can't even save their own congregations? This tactic of putting full-on pictures of abortion on people's windshields, and that doesn't work. I mean, let's think about how the left wins for a second. The left isn't really that committed to an ideology. They really just do whatever gets them the most power, even if that means contradicting what they said the day before. Therefore, they're not really that dedicated to a singular narrative or strategy, and instead they kind of fling 100 different ones at the wall and they just pick the one that sticks. And even if that one starts to fail, they'll dump it in a heartbeat. The left routinely has after-action reports. They reflect on which strategies seem to work and which ones don't, and they make adjustments here and there as needed. But the mainstream right does not do this, and in particular, the Christian right definitely does not do this. And this movement is an example of that. They never seem to lick their finger and put it in the air and say, is what we're doing actually working? Is it effective? I think this is a potential downside of thinking you have God on your side or you're fighting for the side of righteousness. Everything becomes justified. Strategies and their effectiveness seem to be an afterthought when you're automatically divinely right. Did it ever occur to them that the phrase, God hates, insert thing here, is tainted? And if your goal is to persuade people into changing their minds, you should avoid adopting your own version of it. Got Milk was an effective marketing campaign. That's why everybody copied it. God hates was not an effective marketing campaign, and that's why no one uses it. Everyone knows what that phrase is, and the messaging from the Westboro Baptist Church, and yet is there more or less gay people in America now? I'll let you decide. They say we're a nation of hypocrites. Well, if you've been exposed to dissident right thinking for 2 seconds, you know that that doesn't matter. It's hierarchy, not hypocrisy. Power wants to be seen. Sovereign is he who makes the exception. Like, come on, people. We have to catch up here. I mean, you can stay behind and wonder why America doesn't seem to live up to its old catchphrases, or you can educate yourself and quit making an ass out of your cause. I agree with the cause. I think abortion is a horrible scourge on the earth, and I want it to end as well. But I know that quoting Old Testament verses and appealing to old notions of fairness ain't gonna do it. Because that's been the strategy for decades, and it's failed. This video is not meant to be a mean-spirited attack on a movement which I think has honorable goals, although I think they go a bit too far on the no exclusions part. And it seems to be ran in good faith by good people. But this video is an appeal to change strategies from someone who's tired of seeing right-wing movements fail time and time again. We live in a weird time where we have to be smarter than the system to get what we want, and it requires us to be extremely clever and cunning, and this sort of messaging appears to be a blunt object that they're just swinging around like a madman, and it's almost guaranteed to be counterproductive. If we were leftists, we would have changed strategies decades ago and probably got what we wanted by now. I mean, hey, it's a free country. You can keep up the failed strategy that is only shared by the homeless guy on the street corner with his "the end is nigh" sign, or you can adapt to the reality of the world and change your strategy to something that actually works. You know, going out to college campuses with your 10-year-old and you both hand out graphic pictures of abortions to people and say that everybody's a child of God and that some Bible verse in Isaiah is talking about them. That doesn't work. Going to abortion clinics and screaming at women that they're murderers and whores doesn't work. This is a desperate plea to abandon that which doesn't work, so you don't spend any more time looking like a kook and use more of your time being effective. Abolitionist Rising is constantly punching to their right and endlessly ridiculing the mainstream pro-life movement for not being extreme enough, when it is that same pro-life movement that has achieved so much after 50 years of dedicated work. And what has Abolitionist Rising achieved? Nothing, because they're crazy. At least they appear crazy. Here in Kansas, Abolitionist Rising helped introduce a bill into the state Senate that only has 7 co-sponsors and hasn't moved at all since January. Probably because everyone knows that it's a bill introduced from the crazy people. Now, I'm not saying that's reality, but I am saying the reality is that that is what you look like to people. And it hinders your political power if you're trying to move forward in the system as earnestly as you can. How much political power does Westboro Baptist Church have? Not much. You should probably avoid whatever they did. That's all I'm saying. Just food for thought. Anyways, that's all the time I have for today. If you enjoyed this video and type of content I'm making, consider giving this video a like or maybe subscribing. I do have a Buy Me a Coffee now if you want to help support the channel. I will see you all in the next video. Peace.